Welcome back. And as I told you earlier on, the focus of our story this morning is going to be the Kakamega Primary School tragedy, and we'll analyze it and figure out the way forward and perhaps some of the things that might have led to that very tragic incident. And let's start off with a recap of what happened. Now, Naila Kiverenge, a standard 4 pupil at Kakamega Primary School who died in a stampede on Monday, has been laid to rest. 14 pupils were killed in the stampede and 2 others are fighting for dear life in intensive care unit. A requiem mass will be held on Friday for the remaining victims. And as Willie Lusige reports, leaders have called for speedy investigations to establish the trigger of the stampede.
Sorrow and grief characterized scenes at the funeral service for Naila Kiverenge from Kakamega Primary School, who died on Monday when a stampede occurred in the school. Led by sports CS Amina Mohammed, leaders, family of the deceased and fellow mourners expressed their pain after 14 pupils lost their lives and scores of others were injured in the stampede on the staircases of this building that houses more than 1,500 pupils of class 5 and 4. Naila died as she tried to save her younger brother.
Nikaona mtoto wangu alikuwa wa kwanza, wa pili. Nikadhania maybe mtoto analala, ataamuka. Yeye alikuwa ananiambia kila wakati, baba mimi nataka nisome nikuwe daktari mwanajeshi.
Leaders want speedy investigations to establish the cause of the stampede that transpired on that fateful evening. They are also calling for stern actions to be taken against those who will be found culpable.
Agiza kwamba hiyo ripoti itakuja before Monday. Kwa hivyo tungojee hiyo ripoti, tujue kitu gani kilifanyika ili tuweze kuirekebisha.
As leaders we have failed. Kwa sababu siku ngapi tumeenda hiyo shule tukasema hii rekebishwe? Ni mara ngapi tunatembelea hizi mashule zetu kujua zinafanya vizuri ama zimekaa namna gani?
Tumuombe Maulana asaidia hao watoto ambao especially wale wako ICU wapone na tuwaone wamerudi kwa masomo yao wanaendelea.
Kenya Union of Post-Primary Education Teachers KUPPET officials differed with the allegation that maybe teachers failed in their responsibilities or even the structure design is faulty. KUPPET wants school safety standard manual to be reviewed.
Tendencies to just go to places where disasters happened. We were with the minister at Precious Blood, and then a drama was done of moving around and closing a few schools, and it was subsiding. Now we are in Kakamega Primary. A review of the 2008 manual of safety on safety measures in our schools must now be undertaken.
But the disaster management team opposed KUPPET's statement, arguing that there is no need to have another safety guideline report, where the 2000 report has never been implemented.
We like making many documents, but that document, if you read it, it has got a lot of information that if it's followed, it will take care of responsibility of the safety of the pupils and students. And the teacher or the facilitator has a responsibility to ensure that the learners have information.
A spot check on the state of the building indicates that the 3-story building has only 2 exit staircases, one allocated to teachers while the other one is used by more than 1,000 pupils. The staircases are poorly lit with no rail guards. Many desks in class, a clear indication of overcrowding as alluded to by parents.
Unapata stream moja inabeba watoto karibu 70 kwa klasi moja. Kitu yote kitokea emergency, watakimbilia wapi? Mkuwe na mpangilio ili siku nyingine kitu kama hii isifanyike tena.
Lazima tukuwe na disaster preparedness. Nimesikia ndugu yangu akisema hapa potapota ndio walikuwa na pepa watu. Tutangojea lini classes zinakuwa mingi, ikitokea ndio tunaanza kusema ratio ya watoto kwa mwalimu ilikuwa mingi kwa class.
The 2008 School Safety Manual recommends the setting up of School Safety Committee that bears the full responsibility for identifying safety needs of the school with a view to taking the necessary action and mobilizing resources required by the school to be safe. The manual also requires schools to ensure classrooms and other physical structures are clean, well-maintained, safe and properly ventilated. The Kakamega Primary School has released the names of the 14 pupils who perished in the deadly stampede on Monday evening. Antoinette Iramwenya, Prudence Eliza, Catherine Allo, Naila Kiverenge, Prince Vamalin, Nicole Achola, Vanessa Adesa, Fidel Kumbetie, Simon Waweru, Samuel Simeha, Lavenda Akasa, June Nahomecha, Joseph Musami, and Bartha Muyela. Even though investigations are still underway, some of the reasons that I think are behind the death of the 14 pupils of Kakamega Primary School is the narrowness of the stairway, lack of a stability bar to hold on, and apart from that, poor lighting and lack of enough oxygen when we have an accident. Willie Lusige, KTN News at Kakamega Primary.
And may their souls rest in peace. Now, this morning, joining me, we have Dr. Musa Nyandusi, who is the director of the Directorate of the Occupational Safety and Health. We have Ken Koge, who's the technical director, Kaylee's Consortium, as well as Nanis Kanana, who's the health, safety, and environmental expert on our panel this morning. Welcome, gents and lady. And I am quite curious as to what went through your mind. I'll start with you, Dr. Nyandusi. When you heard that story, when it broke a few days ago.
Thank you. First of all, it's really a sad occurrence.
Yes.
And I'm a parent. We are parents. And I'm sure this sends a lot of, it's the thing that most parents fear the most when you do have your child in school. And there's a lot of blame to go around. But what is in my mind is, you know, looking at our existing legislations and our existing regulations, which are actually not in lack, and looking at the gaps that may have existed, and actually proactively looking at whether there is something that we can learn so that this does not happen again.
Right, and we're going to break down some of those failures, perceived failures, as we await the results of the investigation that is ongoing. Ms. Nanis, what do you make of this when you saw the story that broke and the number of kids that were lost, their lives, the innocent lives? What went through your mind as an expert on such matters?
Okay, when I saw the news, I can actually say it is a very sad state of affairs, and we really sympathize with the parents and the families of those kids. And one thing I can say from a health safety perspective is that the only disasters that maybe we can't prevent, maybe they're natural disasters, there must have been something that went wrong, and we are all waiting for the report to know what actually went wrong.
All right. Mr. Koge, your take on that, when it happened, what came to your mind?
Well, of course, first to sympathize with the family and of course, affected close members of the community and the parents and, the teachers. And it's really a very sad occurrence. And, one of the things that really hits our minds when it occurs is, we just say the same words of not again.
Yeah.
Because we keep handling disaster after disaster, in schools. It's like we don't learn from previous events, or we even learn, but we don't even implement anything after that.
Right.
Yeah.
So we're not learning from our previous, lapse in judgment in terms of the school safety and the structures and what have you. So basically, the question that a lot of people are avoiding, even in the media, is whose fault was it? And I'm going to pose this question to my panelists. Who is to blame for this? Because you cannot blame the building itself or, the mood of going home at that time. Who would you say is to blame for what happened? Because there has to be someone responsible.
If you'll allow me to go first.
Yes.
Our country has legislation that has that is benchmarked on international practice and benchmarked on the International Labour Organization, on the WHO, on the International Commission on Occupational Health, in place of the Occupational Safety and Health Act, which was passed in 2007.
Right.
If you remember, up to 2007, we had what we called the Factories and Other Places of Work Act. This sort of only recognized that accidents and diseases would only occur in factory setting and other places of work.
Yeah.
In 2007, recognizing that injuries and diseases happen in all sectors of the economy,
Right.
We enacted the Occupational Safety and Health Act, which thereafter widened the scope to all workplaces. In this instance, schools are workplaces in as much as learners are there, and therefore they fall into
within that
category.
Yes.
So the legislation is there. Who is to blame? Blame is a difficult word.
Somebody
who
has
the responsibility?
Yes.
Maybe let me break it down this way. When you look at the occupational the spirit
yes.
of the Occupational Safety and Health Act, the spirit of the Occupational Safety and Health Act ultimately aims at everybody embracing a safety and health culture.
Yes.
Wherever you are, whether you're driving, you shouldn't put the seatbelt because the policeman will come for you. Whether you are, you're on top of a building, you should be having a safety consciousness about yourself. And there are programs and mechanisms that are actually statutory in nature,
right,
that are supposed to be undertaken by all workplaces. Apart from requiring that all workplaces register, there is the requirement that all workplaces must have a safety and health committee. Having a safety and health committee recognizes that each workplace is unique with its own unique risks. This safety and health committee must have composition from both management or ownership as well as the workers. This makes whatever decisions are made by the safety and health committee binding to the organization in the sense of involving both the owners stroke managers vis-a-vis the workers.
Right.
And there's a requirement that this safety and health committee must meet a minimum of 4 times a year and be able to do safety mapping in your respective enterprises. This includes schools.
Yes. But when the way our schools are set up, is that something that would be possible in theory but not possible in practice?
Deriving from the Occupational Safety and Health Act,
yes,
as well as the Task Force on Safety in Schools, the establishment of safety and health committees in schools is actually one of the safety measures that has actually been articulated, including the Ministry of Education.
Right, so a lack thereof would be illegal?
So you would say illegal, but it's really an oversight, because sometimes the committees are there, but the robustness of the committees within the workplaces to be able to identify the flare-up points that are likely to be, the trigger points for safety issues in terms of ventilation, fire, crowding, all these things become issues which would be a lapse. So in terms of responsibility, I think the government has taken quite a bit of a flack, and for good reason, and we'll take our share of the same. But I think it's fair to always look at both sides of the coin and accept that, listen, I do have a responsibility as the person in the enterprise.
But then you have a situation where you're dealing with children, and
yes,
I'd like to bring in nannies, because children, you wouldn't put responsibility on them the same way you would put on adults who are mature in their thinking and wouldn't be as excitable or as vulnerable as kids of that particular age are. So when you look at the nature of the crowd that we're talking about, these are children, what would you say was a lapse in terms of how to handle them? Because you're not talking about adults in this situation, you're talking about children. You as an adult consider this is a narrow pathway and we shouldn't be stumbling down this pathway, or maybe excitable when you're going through this, but a child will not be able to make that judgment. So when it comes to these sorts of crowd, what was the failure in your opinion?
Okay, from my point of view is that there is a team in that school that is meant to spearhead safety issues, like the director said. So it is the responsibility of that team to pass basic information to these kids. They don't need to have too much, but this basic information, like those kids at a very young age, there's no reason why they should be made, or whatever circumstance that took place, they ran down the stairs. These are kids of class 4, class 5, that is a very young age. So it is unsafe for them to run down the stairs. And that is just one, instance or one practice that we are observing. But there are so many things that can go wrong in such a school setting where we have maybe 200, 400, 500. Some schools have 1,200 students. There are so many things that can go wrong. But are we enlightening the kids on what can go wrong and what can we do about it? What are we supposed to do? What are we not supposed to do in terms of ensuring that we are safe at school?
Yeah, and right, imagining that would have been done and there would have been training on how to respond when there's a tragedy impending. And then you've seen the story that we just ran, and you've seen the narrow, dimly lit hallway or the staircase. So much can be done in that situation, don't you think? Even if you are aware of what to do. I mean, if you're told there's a possibility of taking another exit at that corner where Willie Lusige was, what could a kid do?
Yes, no, that is why in safety we look at the root causes of an incident and the immediate causes. So, yes, there must have been underlying factors that led to the incident. Maybe it might not have taken place then, but maybe in case of a fire, what is the exit route that these kids could have used in case of a terrorist attack, a bomb threat, or any other emergency that could have occurred? Which exit route could have these kids used? So that is why, as much as we are saying, yes, there's maybe a narrative that led to the occurrence of the event.
Yes,
there are also there are also the root causes that we must not overlook. And this is what now we blink the registrations. And what our legislation says, where did we fail, what was overlooked, and
and I'd like to bring Mr. Koge into the conversation. Even structurally speaking, as she's pointed out, those are some of what she's terming as the root causes, some of the constants that couldn't have been changed while that event was happening. What do you think should have been done to ensure that this does not happen, structurally speaking, and considering that this is a crowd of children?
Well, you see, such an incident is not something that just occurred. It must have been a build-up. And for accidents to occur, it's not like, the underlying factors, as she said, there has to be a root cause. And root causes, most of them are actually administrative in nature.
Right.
For example, if these children could have actually been educated, and let me say something simple like knowing do not run down the stairs, and always use the handrail when
Which
going down.
Which was not there, actually.
Yeah. If such basic things would have been there, then such an incident would not have occurred. It goes down, as Director Dr. Nyandusi said, it goes down to the aspect of having a safety culture. And when we try and look at responsibility, who is responsible for this? I would say it is all of us. Because even as parents, we don't get to know what are the standards that schools have for safety and health of our children. When you look at the safety standards for schools developed even under the Ministry of Education, it requires, a safety committee to be in place, which even the head teacher, I think, is the secretary. And there has also to be a teacher who is in charge of safety and health in schools.
Right.
I bet even 99% or even 98% of parents don't know which teacher is in charge of safety and health. We only know the discipline master, but the rest...
Or the teacher on duty.
Yeah, even...
Yeah, so, I mean, I'm trying to think of also... Some of the schools were constructed even during colonial times, and then population has grown, and obviously it's increased. So you cannot blame the school honestly, independently based on the overcrowding, because it now comes down to maybe the ministries and what have you to ensure that these buildings change as the populations of these schools change. So back to you, Dr. Nyandusi, what do you make of this, and other structures that are still standing that could have over time not be suitable to the standards that you've told. They should be clean, they should be safe, they should be structurally sound, but obviously as times change, the needs of the students and the crowds change, and then therefore these structures that sometimes we hear coming down become too weak to hold the crowds that they're supposed to be housing.
Well, thank you. I think the one thing I can say, and I would like to repeat, is the need to constantly have a safety-conscious mindset. We are at a time when we are expanding our educational institutions at a very rapid rate. Our public institutions, and right now we are into the 100% transition, which has a significant impact on the number of learners who are going to be getting into our schools.
True.
And it's inevitable. Now, what we need to do is it's important for us to go back to the basics of safety and health, which require, number one, you're going to have a premise that is going to be extended. If the premise is going to be extended, it's important that those plans are subjected to safety and health approval. These safety and health approvals look at, are there adequate enough egress, means of ingress and egress? Are you able to get in? Are you able to safely get out? You know, do you have alternate routes for emergency exits, for example, fires, stampedes, and things like that? So putting that in the heart of it becomes quite important, and that becomes what goes in the design phase.
Right.
When you fail to put that in the design phase, then you get into a subsequent challenge. If you're not able to do that, you still have the subsequent level of what you can do something about. It's in understanding that this is what we have, and this is how you have to have a conscious discussion about who should be using what exits, what time, for example, is every occupier of the premise going to be leaving at the same time? Are we going to have a staggered way of dealing with this? But this conversation can only be had if you have a safety and health committee in place, because then you would be interrogating your own institution with its own challenges. And I think that's really my response. If we are going to be thinking forward about what needs to happen, about what we need to mitigate, because this is an unfortunate incident which really, as much as possible, should not happen again.
Nanis, when he talks about that introspection and trying to figure out, I'd like you to, as we take a break, I'd like you to tell us just what, or rather bring us into what the possibility of trainings for these committees, because they might be there, but as he said, they really don't know what they're supposed to be looking at, and therefore they need to be educated. So who would be the ones to educate this? This is the ministry, and even when you're trying to make the kids aware of how to, behave in certain instances of disaster, who would come down to them and tell them this is what should happen? Because they cannot tell themselves. Sometimes you might not see the dangers. So who is responsible for that type of training?
Okay, I would like to say that we talking about the Health and Safety Committee in schools. It is good, yes. But then does this committee, is it aware of its roles and responsibility? What is expected of them? What are they supposed to be doing to ensure the safety of the students at school? And again, the basic thing is, do they have the knowledge?
Do they have the knowledge, yes.
Yes, we can have a committee, yes, but they don't have any information on what they're supposed to be doing. And again, safety is not a one-day thing. So if there's a guidance, maybe from the DOSH, or I've seen the school safety manual that was developed, it requires continuous monitoring. It is not a one-day thing. It is not possible, because today you might even carry an audit of a workplace, like this context at school. 99% of the things are working well, but with tomorrow, after 2 weeks, things can change. So it requires someone with the know-how to ensure continuous implementation and improvement so as to have a good and strong safety cultures at our school.
All right.
Now, back to who is supposed to train.
Yes.
Yes. So maybe one important factor or information that is not out there maybe to some of the organizations like schools is that there are institutions and organizations that are licensed to conduct the trainings. Maybe the basic trainings like for the health and safety committee, these are training for that. These are basic training for first aid. These are basic training on what to do in case of a fire. So they are licensed organizations to conduct these trainings.
Who are these licensed organizations? Because I would like to bring to the fore what, whether or not they are actually doing this, because this has happened severally. Dr. Ndusi, you have a burning...
Yes.
I would like to assist her.
Yeah.
I refer to the law, the Occupational Safety and Health Act.
Yes.
The Occupational Safety and Health Act gives responsibility to the director to appoint qualified training institutions. And I think we've done that.
Yes.
And every year, we do subject them to audit and renewal.
Right.
And we do have a curriculum that is set on safety and health. We have a curriculum that's set on fire training. We have a curriculum that's set on occupational first aid.
Yes.
And we do have institutions that do train.
Both public and private.
Both public and private.
Okay, so do you have the mandate of enforcement in case you notice a failure to implement some of these trainings that you have given them?
Yes, in the Occupational Safety and Health Act, yes, there are enforcements.
Does it happen?
It does happen. It does
if you
happen.
Notice a failure,
the thing is about enforcement. Enforcing training is one thing. More often than not, it is when something has gone wrong that you actually go, when the safety systems have failed, or in instances when institutions do not have any safety policies and safety guidelines and they are not complying with what the Act says, then that's really when you get to the point of compliance issues.
Which in many times would be too late. For example, in this particular school.
In this instance,
would you agree?
In this instance, yes.
Yes. So let's take a short break. When we come back, we're going to have more discussions right now. We're going to analyze that and also the post-tragedy handling. For example, in this particular case, we're told border riders were the first responders in this incident. So let's take a short break. When we come back, we'll have more for you right here on Morning Express.
This is KTN News.
Looking for a way to stay informed on matters Central Kenya? Well, the Mount Kenya Star has got you covered. This is the weekly newspaper that brings you all the news from the local political scene, farming, business, and education in the area, with a dose of the culture in and around the Mount Kenya region. So, be sure to grab your copy of the Mount Kenya Star and never miss a story, informative articles, and just what the business community leaders are doing to stay ahead. Mount Kenya Star, agribusiness and enterprise newspaper.
Zimetoa ajira kwa mamilioni ya vijana nchini, lakini pia zimeangamiza maelfu ya watu kupitia ajali barabarani.
Maisha yangu imeathirika sana juu mimi ndiye breadwinner.
Utundu wa wahudumu umegeuka kuwa bukta barabarani.
They normally think that do this like an aeroplane. Ukianza kumuleta juu wanaitana, unaanza kupigwa.
Kutotii sheria.
Si ati hatutambui sheria, but watu tunaichukulia kwa mikono.
Kugonga watu kiholela.
Iwapo mtindo huu utaendelea, bila shaka vizazi vijavyo vitaathirika pakubwa.
And they even ban people's vehicles.
There is no law that says if you are boda you can drive on a pavement.
Usikose makala ya Bukta ya bodaboda Jumapili hii saa 1 jioni, nami Sirajur Rahman Abdullahi kwenye Hadubini.
This week on Kenya Connects, the harsh reality.
This country loses well over 90 people every day, every single day. Essentially like a Kenyan dying every 15 minutes.
Kenya's messy cancer war. And from Africa to the world.
You could be in a village with your phone, take a picture and post it on Instagram. And you could be selling from your village to someone on the other side of the globe.
We connect you to Oswald Boateng. Also, we explore a baking legacy.
Time in 2,000 years, Santa has disappeared.
We are movies. We are music. We are pop culture.
I grew up in church in Kojic, Church of God in Christ in Detroit.
We get constant advertisement for strip clubs and other things like that. But then we bring up the name of Jesus, we're told to be quiet, quiet that down.
But most importantly, we are young. Youth Cafe, Friday from 8 till 8:30.
This is KTN News.
Right, and welcome back. If you have any questions about this particular tragedy or would like to make your contributions to the conversation, please get in touch via Twitter or Facebook. The official hashtag is KTN Morning Express, and we can make you a part of it. And just to reintroduce my panel, we're talking about the Kakamega tragedy and some of the failures and what we need to do going forward. I have Dr. Musa Nyandusi, who is of the Directorate of Occupational Safety and Health. We have Ken Kolgei, who is the Technical Director of Kelly's Consortium, as well as Nanis Kanana, who is an health safety and environmental expert. And we are at a point where post-disaster, we need to figure out how to handle it, because based on the information that comes out of that and the funeral sentiments that were brought out during the funeral of one of the students, is that one border rider is the one that was very hasty in trying to save and reorganize the situation before they even found out that some of the kids had actually lost their lives. And shortly after, we saw pictures of their uncovered bodies all over the internet. I mean, the information was moving at a great speed and obviously not ideal for the parents who are receiving this information. So post-disaster, what needs to happen, Mr. Koge?
Well, essentially, all organizations must have structures in place for handling disasters and emergencies.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm not really surprised that it is, some people are saying that it's border riders who assisted.
Yeah.
They have goodwill.
I'd
say I'm very grateful for them.
But it's not ideal.
It is not ideal, yes. When you look at even on our highways, it's the border guys who help people.
When an accident
happens, yes. But then these border riders, they lack basic knowledge on first aid and handling, handling casualties and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They may have goodwill, but then they could be doing more harm.
Yes.
To
because
the
for
victims,
certain injuries, you're not even supposed to touch.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
to even move people, you don't move
yeah.
persons when it is not necessary. Yeah.
Yeah. So when it comes to ideally speaking, at the school environment,
Yes.
we have your Girl Guides, and I don't know if they still exist, but then the St. John ambulance, what were their names? I don't know what they were called, but they were trained, they got basic training. So ideally, you'd expect even some of the students would have the knowledge to handle this type of disaster. But unfortunately, in this incident, it didn't happen. So if you were to paint a picture of what should have happened when this transpired, including the teachers who are in the school, what do you think should have happened?
You see, teachers, when in school, apart from just being teachers, we have a saying that they are also the doctors, they are the
nurses,
everything,
counselors,
everything for these children. And even in the law, let's even look at the standards, for safety and health from the Ministry of Education. It clearly states that teachers should be trained in first aid. I don't remember seeing my teachers going for trainings in first aid, sorry to say, but that is something that should be happening, but it doesn't happen because I'll tell you one of the reasons that it doesn't happen, because it takes time and it also takes money. But you see, that is because these are short-term. When we look at money and time as aspects to consider whether to do a training or not, we are being short-sighted.
But Dr. Nyandusi has just told us that the directorate actually oversees trainings of this nature across board. So when you say this does not happen, what are you basing this on so that he can respond to that?
Well, we, human beings are basically disobedient. There are laws that are there,
Yeah.
But then, you see, Dr. Nyandusi cannot be everywhere to chase somebody. You've not done, like a prefect. You get what I'm saying? Sometimes these responsibilities have to be personal, like he said. It has to be a culture. So when even these training providers actually approach these schools to train, these people say, like, we don't have enough time. Maybe we are constrained on budget. It's just like even people in their vehicles, they don't buy first aid kits because of
Right. You overlook, or rather just don't count it as very important. Dr. Nyandusi, is this true that time and money are pushing people away from embracing the trainings that you are supposed to be supposedly giving to private and public institutions, that include schools such as the one that we saw in the news?
I think let me first address the first part where Ken was talking about, and then I address the second part of what you're addressing. First, again, in the Act, it envisages every workplace having an emergency response plan, an ERP. And an emergency response plan is a plan that puts in place, a sudden, major happening in the institution. What would happen if today there was an explosion in the studio? What would happen if there was a fire? What would happen if there was, a stampede? What would, you have a security scare, So you do have a plan that starts from inception. And again, it goes back to how well you understand your workplace. It also goes back, during the time when children are in parade, you can spend 5 minutes to talk about something related to safety. Indicate, we do not want to see you doing ABCD, running. If you are making them fire ready, in case of a fire, attack it with whatever you can find that is, then how to use basic usage of your fire extinguishers. Make sure you don't use the lifts. Make sure you conglomerate in a certain point, and make sure you account for everybody who has been there. But this information cannot be said once. It's something which you have to make a conscious decision to be saying it again and again, and periodically to actually be able to run a drill. Because again, they say when you go to war, you have a plan.
True, yeah.
But they say in a war, the first casualty of war is the plan. The plan is the first person to die. So unless you're actually going to put it through a process,
you test it to
you may have something which in theory works, but in practice, when it's subjected to what you're going to have, may not work.
And given the uniqueness of the school environment,
trainings tend to be invisible. In the sense that they are soft and very preventive oriented. In times when something happens, it reveals serial failures, which now become issues of compliance and often become the issues that we actually prosecute.
Yes.
So going to an institution and, taking somebody to court because he has not done a training may not be reasonable.
Would not hold water.
No, it would hold, but it's not the most reasonable use of a resource. What generally happens is that when you find something happening, when there's a safety failure, usually it's like a building that collapses.
Right.
It doesn't just collapse. Usually there's a crack that somebody didn't do anything about, it widened, nobody thought about it, it got big. When vehicles would come, it would shake before eventually it collapses. The collapse, something that happens to this magnitude, is a final event. And if you do an analysis, a backward analysis, you'll actually find that there are other lapses. And that's now when you actually talk about the issues of now enforcement and the rest. But speaking as the director and understanding how much resources we have in government to be able to police all the 750,000 workplaces in this country, what my plea is that all of us need to embrace safety and health as an individual, as an establishment, as an institution, as a workplace, and endeavor to have a responsibility for safety and health to yourself. And then to the institutions where you're given, custodianship over and stewardship.
All right. Now, Nanes, when we talk about now the plan that they should have, the drills, what would you say should be the basic training, or rather the plan that's in mind, especially in school, for possible disasters, be it fires, be it a collapsed building or a stampede that just happened? How would you approach that?
Okay, basically that is about emergency response plan. So, and it should be detailed to the different kinds of incidents that we anticipate. Like we've said, there is fire, there can be a terrorist attack, there can be a bomb threat, and also in the event of multiple accidents, what do we do? Because schools are, most of the time they have one school nurse.
Right.
Yes. It is a situation that has taken place and 30 students are injured. They require help. Who is going to respond? How are we going to do about? How are we going to go about it as a school? So that is something that we should have a plan. And going back to your question, how are we going to do about it? This goes back to the policies that we have.
Okay.
And what do you have a policy? Then in that policy, it's going to guide you on developing the emergency response plan. But to take you back, as I said earlier, it is not possible to do that if you don't have an advisor, a safety advisor, someone with the knowledge of how to go about it. Because yes, these teachers have the training of teaching. I'm not sure if they are trained on basic first aid. Maybe it was done one time during their training in colleges, but with time, it's human minds. You need to be a refresher training. So I would say that schools require safety advisors who can spearhead all this process, develop an emergency response plan for the different cases we anticipate.
Mr. Koge, apart from the emergency response plan, what are the actual things, for example, forget about the abstract notions or the plans and the things that in theory, literally, maybe it could be the vehicle that would take them to hospital or what have you. What should a school have to make sure in terms of facilities and infrastructure to ensure that they can quickly respond to this type of disaster?
Well, everything that we might see in regard to, structures that should be in place, all of them are actually in the law. Yeah, things like, access to an ambulance, access to fire services, arrangement, even, the size, even in the dormitories, like there should be at least 2 meters,
between the
in the aisles. Requirements like a class should hold, a maximum of 30 students.
Right.
If it is a single desk, if it is those desks that they share, the two of them, it should just be 40 students. Yeah, such things, these are things that schools can actually do.
Right.
When, you know, I also appreciate the multi-agency approach to safety, in that safety is not really just only a responsibility that we should look at, that it should only fall under, you know, it should be under, you know, the Directorate of Workplace Safety and Health. There's also responsibility under the Ministry of Education. When you try and look at all these standards, even in the Safety Standards Manual, it states that, you know, schools should carry out emergency drills twice a term. I don't know how many do that.
Okay.
I don't know whether you did. Did you do any drill when you were in school?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, also the seriousness at which, because to some it's quite comical to take it seriously, because children are children. But far from kids, there are many institutions that could be in danger. Let's take a look at the 100% transition that the government is going for. This implies there's going to be more students in primary school, in high schools rather. We have hostels. We did mention that during the break. We have hostels that are not within institutions. So they might be right outside the jurisdiction of maybe the directorate of DOSH, or rather at the ministry, even if it were to try and police and ensure that these are done securely. So as a parting shot, let's talk about moving forward. What needs to be done, all these things considered, so we are not witnessing this rate of dying, particularly of young, innocent, promising members of our community. I'll start with you, Dr. Nyandusi.
Thank you. Like I said, this is, it's not just a wake-up call, but a sad wake-up call. But I also think it is, it's a call to relook at what exists in legislation, in regulation, and in policy.
Yeah.
It's also a call for both those of us who are charged with the stewardship of institutions to relook the issues of safety and health. Not just in schools. Schools, of course, are very emotive because that's where our children are.
Yes.
And they are dependent on the stewards of the institutions to make the correct decisions about the same. It becomes imperative that we begin relooking at the issues of having safety and health committees and ensuring that they are active, and ensuring that you keep with the proposals that emanate from your own safety and health institution, that they meet, that they review their safety risks, and they put processes that mitigate to the same. It's important that all institutions begin creating relationships with the persons we have approved as advisors. And we are open in the directorate to actually assist them to be able to get that kind of information and advice, to be able to conduct audits. Because safety advisors conduct audits in workplaces and are able to show you the places where you have gaps and places where you have to do what.
Right, and do parents, because they're the biggest losers in this situation, have a say in all this?
The way the school is structured, the PA, the Parents Association,
PTA,
has a lot of say in the way the school is run. They have a lot of say in the way, in fact, they are the biggest investors in the schools because they're the ones who actually put up infrastructure projects.
Right.
And it's important for them also to highlight the issues of, listen, it's good, we are going to expand and get 10 extra classrooms, but have we thought about where are they going to be? Are they going to be well ventilated? Are our kids going to be getting respiratory infections? In case of an emergency, do you have adequate exits for the same? Are they adequately lit? Let's embrace the issue of safety and health and not make it something for others.
Yes. Nanis, could you give your parting shot?
Okay, I would say that the issues of safety dwell on implementation because we can all agree the policies are there. For instance, on such a case of where there was multiple injuries, there was supposed to be a plan. There's supposed to be first aiders who are supposed to try and promote recovery of these injured students. There's supposed to be an arrangement with the ambulance. Do you have any arrangement with any hospitals so that in case of such an emergency, you just contact them and they are ready to receive the patients as they come? Then also it's about improving the safety culture, changing the mindset of how we perceive safety, because we need to be aware of what can go wrong in our surrounding.
Mr. Koge.
I would like to say that, you know, everybody should actually embrace safety. Parents should take it as a personal responsibility to ensure that the schools that they take their students to adhere to safety standards, carry out safety audits, carry out trainings. If I want to take maybe my daughter or son to a school, you know, I go there and I ask them, where is this, who is the parent, who is the teacher, who is in charge of, you know, safety and health, what are the measures that this school has done. You know, instead of just looking at, most parents look at what number did this school rank during the...
That's the major concern. So we should take it deeper than just that.
Absolutely.
Because when the loss happens, it cuts very deep for not just for the parents and even for the entire nation, because those could have been future doctors, you know, presidents. You never know what we have lost in those young lives. Now, thank you so much to my panelists. I had Nanis Kanana, Health, Safety and Environmental expert, Ken Kosgei, Technical Director at Kaylee's Consortium, as well as Dr. Musa Nyandusi, of the Director of the Directorate of Occupational Safety and Health. Thank you very much. And